Hello and welcome to the MMO Development class. So today we are going to continue with CGS. My main goal for today is to get texture generation implemented in CGS itself. Now, with texture generation, the reason we need it is because CGS provides a lot of capabilities that aren't built into Unity's GUI system, and one of those capabilities is a border. In CGS, we support a CSS-like border property. If we go ahead and take a look at this, what we have here is stuff. What we have here is the ability to create borders on each side of the rectangle, give them colors, and give them a width. At this point, CGS will only support solid borders. Now, complexity starts to get involved, however, because there is no built-in concept into Unity for borders, so we have to create our own border texture, generate it based off of the border properties that the user specified, and then set it. We also will have to keep in mind that the user could potentially also have set a background property onto one of our elements, which means that our borders are going to have to be combined onto or on top of the existing background property. So in my previous implementation, and I think what I'm going to do here, is I created a class that was responsible for generating these textures. So let's go ahead and create that. I'm going to create a texture generator. And my texture generator is going to have a single field, which is going to create a cache of my different textures. So I'm going to create a private read-only dictionary of string and texture 2D. Also notice that I have recently upgraded to ReSharper 8, which there's a lot of cool things in ReSharper 8, but there are going to be some issues because the IntelliSense is now a little laggy. But one of the benefits of that, notice how I simply type in texture 2D and a reference to texture 2D pops up, and when I hit enter, I get that using statement up there at the top. This was previously only available with the Control-Shift-Space completion, but is now available through the normal completion, which is pretty cool. There's some other neat features of ReSharper 8 that I like a whole lot, especially the new Control-T. Control-T used to just navigate to a type, but now it navigates to a type or a file or a symbol, which is cool. Anyway, so I'm going to create a textures here, create a, also another thing, the code completion thingies pop up with the IntelliSense as well, which is neat. Alternatively, I could have done what I usually do, which is Alt Insert Enter, which is really just about the same amount of keystrokes, but whatever. Let's go ahead and instantiate that and see. Now we have an example of why the introduction of the new IntelliSense kind of irritates me. Previously, the IntelliSense would block when you started typing, but now it doesn't, which means I typed in _TE and then hit space. Normally, when the IntelliSense blocks, it would wait, pause the cursor until the IntelliSense came up, which would have selected textures. But because it's now a little bit more asynchronous, unfortunately, there will be times where I accidentally type something so fast that IntelliSense doesn't pick it up. So just a heads up. And we got another example of that right there. Because I need to type in new space, and then I have to wait like 200 milliseconds for IntelliSense to pop up, which unfortunately is sometimes 200 milliseconds too long when I'm typing quickly. Okay, so this method is really going to have this class is really going to have one method, and that method will return a background for a given GUI style. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to create a public texture 2D, generate background, and the background is going to take in a GUI style, and it's also going to take in a, and by GUI style, I kind of messed up there. I need to take in an iComputed style. However, we do have this CGS style, where are you used? I'm thinking of a potential refactoring here because if I look at this, style, See, the problem I'm running into right now is my my background or my texture generator. It not only needs to return a texture 2D, it also needs to modify the border property of a GUI style, which is going to be a little bit of a pain because I need to modify my GUI style from within my generate background. I could instead write this a little bit differently. I could say probably void, take in a GUI style, and then GUI style, CGS style, and then I could rename this to be something like build background or apply background. I'm probably going to keep it like this for now. We'll see if anything changes in that regard later. Okay, so now I need to retrieve some properties out of my CGS style. I'm going to retrieve these properties out and alias them out into variables because I'm going to be using them multiple times in this method. One of the things I need to do is come up with a way to cache backgrounds. Now I can cache them based off of a few different things, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cache them based off of the values of all of the properties that modify what my background will be generated as. And those values are going to be my border, so get property border property. They are going to be then I need my left border, which is going to be border dot left, my right border right, my bottom, or how about top border? That makes more sense. Border, and my bottom border bottom. Then I need my background property, which is going to be CGS style.get property background property. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just jump out of this method if we don't need to do anything. We won't need to do anything if all of the borders have no width and our background color is null. So if our left border dot width, there's a few ways to do this. I'm going to go ahead and go into my border property. I'm going to add an IEnumerable to this, public, or actually I can just make this implement IEnumerable of type border, and then its get enumerator method will simply yield return left top or left right top bottom, left right top bottom. That way I can now say if border dot all bb width equals 0 and my background color is null, then simply return. Okay, so now what I need to do is I need to generate the key that I'm going to use to cache my generated images. So I'm going to go ahead and say private, how am I going to generate this key? Well, I'm going to generate the key based off all the things that can modify the color of my border, or the size of my border. So what's that going to be? That's going to be the 4 borders. It's going to be the background color, and it's going to be the background image. So private static, static string get generated image cache key, And then it's going to take in, a few different things. It's going to take in a border offset. Is a border offset? No, it's not going to take in the border offset because the border offset can't modify. No, it can't. Right, so it's not going to take in a border offset. It's going to take in an IEnumerable border called borders, and then a background property background. And then what it's going to do is it's going to return a string of shutting down Steam. It's going to take in return a string of all of the borders concatenated, as well as the background. So to generate all the borders, I'm simply going to do a string.join on borders.select b dot. Actually, I believe my border2 string does return width and color, so I think I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to do join, I'm going to do concat. Then I'm going to do concat requires a array because it's dumb. And then for my background, I need to return the background image and the background color. So the background image is going to be background dot let's do color. Color does not equal null. Then background dot color. Otherwise blank. So let's go ahead and color.toString. What does my color2string do anyway? That's fine. Otherwise blank. Then I'm going to do the background image, which is going to be background.image, which oh great. There we go. Stop that madness. Image, which I believe my image is defaulted to null. So because it's defaulted to null, I need to do background image is not equal null. Background.image to string or blank. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say cache key equals get generated image cache key on my IEnumerable borders as well as my background. And then I'm going to say texture 2D generated image if textures.tryGetValue cache key out generated image, then return generated image. Or whoops, that's not what I wanted to do because we're not returning it. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if not, then generated image equals, well, how about generate image or generate background? Background's a better word. Okay, so what does the background need to know about? It needs to know about our borders and it needs to know about our background. So I'm going to pass in border and background. So is it done because it makes him remember more or because it's harder than it needs to be? You're talking about string.concat? In .NET 1 through 3.5, string.concat only took in these different sets of arguments or parameters. In .NET 4, string.concat takes in and can take in an IEnumerable of string, or I believe it also takes in an IEnumerable of object. And same with string.join. Now, if it did take in an IEnumerable of string or object, then I did not have to do the .toArray here. But the dumb thing is if I forget to do the .toArray, borders.select will return an IEnumerable of string. Well, an IEnumerable of string is actually an object. So what happens is it uses this first overload. This first overload will simply print out the result of invoking toString on the object passed in, which means string.concat with this will return something like system.collections.generic. I don't know, like enumerable iterator or something like that, which is dumb. So I have to do .toArray on it on previous versions of .NET so that it uses this overload, which takes in an array of strings. I wouldn't have to do that if it was on .NET 4. The string.join does the exact same thing. It's very irritating. Okay, so then we do this. I'm also going to cache it. So I'm going to say textures at cache key, and then I'm going to say GUI style dot normal dot background equals generated background. Then I'm going to say GUI style dot border. Now this is the GUI style border. This is a fun part of how GUI styles work. They have a border property, which is a rect offset. And rect offset is basically a rectangle with the left, right, top, and bottom of numeric values. Now the problem, or what this does actually, is this border property defines how much of the background of the GUI style is considered to be the border. Does that even make sense to anyone? It took me a while to finally understand what this even did. So if I wanted to, to apply an actual border to a GUI style, what you have to do is you have to generate a texture. The texture has to have a border within it, and then you set that texture to the background of the GUI style. Then you tell the GUI style how many pixels are you considering to be the border, and that affects the way the GUI style performs its stretching and repeating. Because otherwise what would happen is the GUI style would become, or the background of the GUI style would become distorted in a way that you don't want it to. So what I have to do is I have to, when I generate a texture with the border on it, I have to take the border that was specified by the CGS style and add it to the other border offset that was specified by the CGS style. So I have to say border equals new rect offset, passing in left border dot width plus, and then I have to pass in the existing border offset property. The border offset property I'd never extracted, so let me go ahead and extract that. I'm going to say var border offset equals CGS style. See, this is so annoying. It's so annoying. It's, as much as I love the new features of ReSharper 8, this performance issue may very well force me to install ReSharper 7 again, unless they get it resolved very, very soon. I'm going to complain to JetBrains actually about this, because this is just asinine. Completely breaks my workflow. Anyway, so get property, border offset property. So I'm going to say left border blah 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 blah, border offset, not order offset, left dot value. Then right border dot width plus cast to end border offset right value, and then top border dot width plus end border offset top value, and then bottom border dot width plus int cast of border offset bottom dot value. Okay, so that's really all that's needed to actually apply the background to the GUI style, but we still have the problem of actually generating the background. So this is going to require, well, the bulk of the code to implement this. Alright, so let's start off with creating our texture 2D. Now, what I need to do is I need to determine if the background should be a, basically I need to either retrieve the background image that the user set to start off with, or I need to create a new texture 2D of something. Now this is where things get irritating, because I also have to take into account the background color. Okay, so let's start off with the first case. If the background property has an image set, so if background.image does not equal null, then I'm going to load a background image into memory. So there's a variety of ways that I can go about doing this. Let's think here. Let's think. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just create another method, or you know what, that's actually, I'm just going to do resource.load on this. I did something else in the original version, but we don't need any of that functionality at this very moment. So I'm going to simply do resource, there you go, .load, background.image.resource path, and then that's all I need to do that. Now, I need to do something kind of hackish right here. Basically, the images that you use as backgrounds for CGS have to be set to read and write, or at least read, because I need to be able to read them in to copy them to my destination. So, unfortunately, unless anything's changed in Unity 4, which I don't think it has, yeah, there's no way to determine if a texture 2D is actually readable, and unfortunately that means I have to do a bit of a brute force to determine if it's readable. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a try block. I'm going to say background image dot get pixel at 0 and 0. Oh, come on. There you go. Then I'm going to catch a Unity exception. And I'm going to say debug.log error cannot use image blah to add border blah. Image blah is going to be background.image.resource path, and then blah is simply going to be e.message. So that'll tell the user if they haven't set up their image properly. I know, this is horrible, and I'm ashamed, but that's how it is. And then just to make sure that we don't get any errors further down than this, just to make sure that things still actually work and don't completely crash the system, I'm going to create a new BG image with a texture 2D of a width 1 and a height of 1. Now, if they don't have an image, then what we need to do is we need to create a texture that we will be using to copy into our final texture. And because they can also set a background color, the way I did this, is I instantiated a new texture 2D with a height of 1 and a width of 1. Then I set its only pixel to the background color, and then I used that to copy to the final texture. It just makes the code a little bit cleaner as far as dealing with both the ability to have a background image or not have a background image. So I'm going to say background image equals new texture 2D 1.1. Come on. There you go. And then I'm going to say background image dot set pixel, and then I'm going to say 0, 0. And then what I'm going to do I'm going to pass in. Oh, come on. I'm going to say, well, no, that looks kind of ugly. That looks a little less ugly, I suppose. I'm going to say background.color does not equal null. So if they did set a color, then what I want to do is I want to return background.color.toUnity. Otherwise, I want to set this to be transparent, which is simply going to be a new color of 0, 0, 0, 0. Then I'm going to say background image dot apply to apply the changes that I just made to it. Copy it back to video memory or whatever it does. I really need to build my own implementation of the GUI so I don't have to work with so many abstractions that make this code probably a lot more inefficient than it should be. but that's coming at a later date. Okay, so what I need to do now is I need to create the final image that I'm going to be setting to the background. So, this is going to be fun. I first need to calculate the width and the height of the final image. So the width is going to be my left border. So border.left.width plus my right border. So border.right.width plus my background image.width. Then I need to create my height, which is going to be border.top.width plus border bottom.width plus background image.height, because those are the pixels I'm adding to my image to represent my border. Then I'm going to create my final texture, so the final texture that I'll actually be returning, which is going to just be final image. I don't like background image. Background texture is better, I guess. And then I'll also have a final texture. The final texture will be a new texture 2D, passing in width, passing in height. I'm going to pass in a format of ARGB32, which is pretty standard, and I definitely want the alpha channel for obvious reasons. And I don't want to do any mip mapping. But in addition to all of this, I need to set its filter mode to point. The reason I'm doing that is otherwise actually I can show you exactly what will happen if I don't do this later down the road, but this has to do with how it interpolates between the colors as the image gets stretched in either width or height. But using the point is the most simplistic form of that sort of interpolation. In fact, I think point means that there is no interpolation, which is what we want. And like I said, I'll show you guys how that affects my image later. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the left border. Okay. So for var x equals 0, x is smaller than width, x plus plus. So we're moving from, or our x coordinate goes across the width, but our x coordinate, yeah, it has to. And then we'll do our y coordinate. So y equals 0, y is smaller than height, y plus plus. Then we have to see here. Oh no, what I'm doing first is I'm copying the background into the final texture, which means that I need to loop over everything. I need to determine if we are looking at the left border or the right border or neither, or the top border or the bottom border, or if we're looking at nothing. And if we're looking at nothing, then we are just, well, supposed to copy in from the background texture itself. So I'm actually going to just do all the borders in one nested for loop. That should be the most efficient way of doing it, and it should be easily possible, because what I gotta do first is I gotta say if x is smaller or equal to my left border, or my border.left.width, that means we need to print out a left border. I don't know why I put it 4 there. So if x is smaller or equal to that, then I need to do final texture.setPixel xy, and then border left color to unity. Else if my x is larger or equal to my total width subtracted by my border.right.width, that means we're looking at our right border. So that's going to be final texture.setPixel xy border right. I don't know why I'm doing it this way. I'm going to say color equals border left. Come on, there you go. Color to unity, and then, oops, no, what are you doing? Stop this. Otherwise, I'll set the color to my right, color unity. Next, if our Y component is smaller or equal to my bottom, then it's flipped. If it's greater, it's smaller then. No, if it's greater than the top border, it's greater, no. If it's smaller or equal to the border dot top dot width, then we're going to be using the border top color. Oh, come on. Why are those keys so close together? Otherwise, so how would we do our bottom? We would do our bottom if our Y component is larger or equal to my height subtracted by border dot bottom dot width. Then we're using our bottom border. Now, if none of this is true, that means we are going to be copying from our background, our initial background. And so that's going to be, let's see, so that's going to be color is going to be equal to my background texture dot get pixel, and then we're going to be passing in an X and a Y component. Now the X component is going to have to be subtracted by my left width to get the proper one, and my Y component is going to be having to the words my my top width, I think. Okay, so now we've gotten the color of the image. Now I'm going to do final texture dot set pixel on X, Y, and color. And then I'm going to do final texture dot apply to commit the changes. And then I'm going to return the final texture. I have no idea if any of this works. Alright, so now that I've done that, let's go ahead and instantiate my texture generator somewhere, and probably in my adapter, and then we can use it to set our background as the last step. So if I jump into my adapter, I'm going to instantiate my private texture generator. I'm going to have that instantiated in my constructor. And there's ReSharper again, screwing everything up. Come on. I'm going to go crazy, seriously. Then I'll do, at the end of this, the final step, I'm going to say texture generator apply background to GUI style, passing in my computed style. Alright, I have no idea if this works, so let's see what happens when we try to run it. I'm going to launch the Unity project for testing. Then I'm going to launch the thing on the stuff. This guy. Load up my scene. Load up my CGS. CSS, or how about less? Okay, so now I have my CGS loaded. I should have my project here. There's something that's... This is going to really bug. There it goes. Okay. So for my test screen, I'm just going to delete all this for now. I don't need any of this. I'm going to do a page wrap, and then, I don't know, let's do a button. Hey there. Okay, and then in my CGS, I'm going to say button. For now, I'm just going to say color is red. And let's see what happens. Okay, we have a button. Now, what happens if I say border left, or how about border right, is 1 pixel red? Nothing happens. 1 pixel blue? Okay, nothing happens either. Let's set the background to dark gray. And hey, look, nothing is happening at all. So that isn't ideal. I think we may have a bug somewhere. Alright, let's figure this out. So g.button, what should we read only? G.button goes in here, blah blah blah. GUI style does get adapted. Let's first check to see if it made it past this check. So debug, log, checking 1, checking 2. Let's see if it made it past there. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and I get absolutely nothing in my console. Oh, do you know why? Because I forgot to build my project. Hey, look. So now I can do a padding of 3 pixels, and we have a border and a background image. So let's do a border bottom of 5 pixels, light gray. Nothing happens. Let's do a border top of 5 pixels RG, or how about red? Border top does nothing. Let's do a border left of 5 pixels RGBA. Okay, let's try rerunning this. Maybe my caching thing has worked. Now it looks like the only thing that's working is my border right. So my border right's working, nothing else is. My background color is working too, which is nice to see. Or maybe it's not working. Or maybe my cache is being dumb. Okay, it doesn't look like my background color is working. Okay, so my background color is not working, only my border right is working. But that's a step. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pause, and I will be right back. And we're back. So let's go ahead and figure out why it is that my texture generation is failing so spectacularly. Let's see here. So let's give it a padding of 10 pixels. Looks like, actually, no. Huh. let's figure out the background thing first. So I have a background of white, and for some reason my background is entirely black. Or maybe it is. Yeah, it's just all black. So let's go ahead and figure out why that is. If I jump back into my project, so if we load that, we set that thing to the thing, and we get background color .to Unity and background texture apply. What happens if we debug log out background texture dot get pixel at 0, 0? And there's resharper just ruining my day again. Let's go ahead and build that out and see what we get. We do get a complete white. So it is pulling that properly. So it must not be happening is our thing right here. So I'm going to say debug log out setting blah. I want a debugger. I want a debugger. Give me a debugger. Somebody give me a debugger. This is painful. This reminds me of writing websites in PHP before Xdebug became stable on Windows, which it still really isn't that stable. It's kind of an embarrassment. Setting 0, 0 to black. So it is setting a color to black. Let's figure out which one of these it's deciding to... Oh, derp. That's probably why. Zero is smaller than or equal to 0. Hey, look, we have white. And if I change this background color to red, we get red. If I change it to blue, we get blue. If I change it to light gray, we get light gray, slightly darker gray. And if I change it to really dark gray... Okay, so that's nice. Let's figure out our border. Our border right has been working, so 5 pixels, darkish gray. So our border right works just fine. Let's check out our border left. 5 pixels red. And our border left is working now. How about our border top? 5 pixels blue. Our border top is failing. Let's try our border bottom. Okay. Well, our border top is borked and our border bottom is borked. So let's try to figure out our border top first. So if we run through this code again, if x width is minus border top width, stuff and things. Let's think about this. So if y is smaller than our border top width, then we use our top. Y will always be smaller. No, it won't, because that's border top width. So why doesn't that work right? Let's look at this again in Unity. So what's happening is our border top is replacing the border on everything. Or it's replacing the color on everything. So there's something wrong with this code right here. If y is smaller than border top width, if y is smaller than border top width, then we use the top border. That makes sense, doesn't it? Does it not make sense to anybody here? You should speak up now because I'm confusing myself. Alright, it's time for reference code. Reference code is good code. doing this backwards? Y is from bottom. See if y equals 0 is bottom left. Alright, final texture dot set pixel 0, 0. Let's set that to a new color of white. Alright, so we should have a white pixel. Oh, stop that. We should have a white pixel somewhere. Well, we have a whole lot of white pixels on the bottom left. Bottom left. So if y is y flipped? Y might be flipped, which means that we should do oh, border top width. It's border top, or sorry, no, never mind. It's going to be height subtracted by that. And no, that's backwards. Why is that backwards? I have no idea. But trial and error is a legitimate form of fixing bugs. And hey, look, our bug is fixed. So our border top now works properly. Although I do want my border top, I can't remember in CSS, does it? Which way does it stack? I can't remember. Oh no, it does that weird little, that little diagonally thingy. I'm not going to worry about the diagonally thingy right now. Alright, let's check border bottom now. Border bottom is going to be 5 pixels, and then let's do a... let's do white. And border bottom has no effect. Okay, so that's because border bottom is going to now be, so if it's flipped, then it's going to be y is, it's just the other way around? No, that can't be it. It should be y is, no, if y is greater or equal to border bottom width, that doesn't make any sense. But you know what, none of this makes sense, and you know what's easier than trying to figure out the logic conclusion of something? Trial and error. Okay, so that's backwards. So because now I know that's backwards, all I gotta do is flip the conditional, and we should see the magics. Alright, well, those are our 4 borders. Okay, so... Alright, so we still have some time here. Let's go ahead and implement some hover states and some active states. Now, I'm probably going to be, like I said before, I should what? Okay, let me make sure that all of these thingies are right. I'm going to change all the borders to be 1 pixel. And it looks like my border right okay, so it looks like there's something wrong with my border right. Thanks for pointing that out. There we go. Alright, awesome. Then let's go ahead and do that. Alright, the last thing, let's go ahead and do our background image thing. I'm going to go ahead and jump into Photoshop, and I'm going to create a background image. Let's just do 50 by 50, sure. And what am I going to do here? Let's go ahead and find my layers, which my layers are collapsed for some reason. Toss in a gradient, which for some reason I can't. There we go. Let's do a gradient of, well, that's kind of ugly. That's still kind of ugly. There, that's a little sexier. Let's do that. Let's save it out to a ping. It doesn't need to be a ping. We could do, actually, I can't even think anymore. I don't know why I can't think anymore. This thing's kicking my butt. Now, where did I? Now I have to navigate my hard drive, which is actually a very scary place. Because I totally forgot where I actually physically located this particular thing. I suppose I could just jump into here, copy and paste this path. There we go. Go to Assets. I'm going to add a Textures folder. Then I'm going to add a Resources folder underneath that. And I'm going to call this button BG. Save it as a ping. Jump back into Unity. Have it import that asset. And if you recall, I'm going to have to set my thingy to the thing. Where are you? Read write enabled. There we go. Gotta make sure that's checked. Save it out, or hit apply, sorry. Save that. So now I have a button BG. So let me go ahead and, instead of a background color, I'm going to say resource button dash bg.ping. Save it and see what happens. We get a bunch of null reference exceptions. Oh, it's not going to tell me anything. Are you even going to tell me the line number? No, you're not, because you don't know how to read PDBs. It's erroring out object reference not set to a reference of an object. Where are you doing this to me? That would throw it in, well, back to the shotgun approach of debugging, which I really hate, but sometimes you have no choice. Someone give me a debugger. And I forgot to build. Okay, it is null actually. Why is it null? Because maybe something. Button bg.ping. Do not put extensions in? I can't remember. It's been way too long since I've done any of this. It is a good warm-up exercise though. And hey, look, there's a button background. I'm going to go ahead and... well, it's confusing why that returned null and it still let me cast. Whatever. For some reason I can't brain today. If this is null, then debug log error cannot find resource blah background dot image dot resource path and otherwise to hell with clean coding. Just a heads up, that is way too many levels of indentation for a method. There we go. So what happens if you type in an invalid resource name? You should... Awesome. Okay, that's fine. I don't really care. Alright, so there's our gradient. Yeah, I usually aim for 1 level of indentation, except for obvious there's obvious exceptions to that rule, as you can see right there. But typically speaking, I do not like indenting this much. It makes the code very difficult to read. But you know, at this point, whatever. Or yeah, I could clean this up. It wouldn't be that difficult to clean this up, actually. I can go ahead and take all this code, or what I can do is I can say private texture 2D load background and texture background property background, and then I can say if background.image does not equal null, then do this stuff, but except for background texture bar blah, then return null. And then to remove this level of indentation, I can invert it. Oh, come on, stop this. Inverting that, I can say return null. Then I can do that try right there, return background texture, and return null. Move that underneath this method. Then say var background texture equals load background texture background. I'm actually going to rename this to try load background texture. Then I'm going to say if that is null, then do that. And this code became really ugly as well. Okay, so that cleans up our code a little bit, and we're down to 1 level of indentation, except for this nested for loop, but whatever. Okay, so unfortunately I don't have any unit tests to make sure that that actually didn't break anything. Yay for no unit tests. But it works. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to build out... Oops, I forgot to build before I tested it. Or tested it, quote unquote. It's not really testing, it's just running it and seeing if it blows up. Okay, so let's jump back into this and let's do some hover and active states. Now the code for the hover and active states are going to change a lot next week once I actually get into positioning. I've been meaning to do positioning for a while, but because that code is probably the most complex aspect to CGS, and it wasn't very clean in my first implementation of it, I've been trying to implement everything else before I get to positioning, so that when I actually go ahead and implement positioning, I have an idea of all the other code that's required for that. So let's just toss in some very naive examples of hover states and active states to see that code working. And then we'll wrap up, and then next week we'll get into positioning, which will probably involve some refactoring. Where am I going? I'm going into my builder. Let's go into my builder. Let's jump into button, because that's going to be the one that you're going to be doing hover states on most frequently. Let's think here. Words. See, the problem is the previous implementation of this was a bit gnarly. Because I pretty much repeated a bunch of code for each one of these little things. So let's see about, again, just a naive implementation to get a feel for how I'm going to implement this. Now, there's a cool method in GUI layout, and that method is GUI layout dot great. What's that method called? I know one person in here who knows what I'm talking about. There's a method that I want. Is it space? No, it's not space. Or is it GUI layout utility dot getRect? There we go. Okay, the getRect method is cool because it returns us, it not only returns us a rectangle, but it also reserves that space for us. So what I can do is I can say GUI layout rect text GUI style, which errors out because of something I did wrong. Because I need a GUI content, which I need to instantiate, and I need to pass in my text for my button. So this will not only return the rect that will be used by this button, but it'll also reserve that space for me, which is cool because now I can do some very basic hover detection. So what I can do is I can say if rect contains my, what is it, event.current.mouse position, which was that to, no, it wasn't, okay. Okay, so if rect contains this, then I need to do element.add pseudo class hover. Now, if it not only contains it, but it is active, I need to add the active button to it, or the active pseudo class to it. My words are obviously getting really messed up right now. So I'm going to say if get mouse button 0, so if they have the left mouse button down, then we add a pseudo class of active. So if any of these things are true, we need to recalculate our style, which is fairly straightforward because all I got to do is, let's think here. I have to adapt it twice, don't I? That's gross. The world won't end. It might, though. Again, there'll be a better way of doing this next week once we get some more advanced layouting going. So I'm going to say style equals CGS environment instance dot get style for element, passing in element, and then I'm going to say GUI style dot CGS environment instance adapter adapt element style dot style. Okay. So what that means is I should be able to go back here, hit run, and now I should be able to, well, that was unexpected. Oh, right. I'm no longer going to do GUI layout.button. I'm going to say GUI.button, and I'm going to pass in the rectangle that I reserved the space for. Okay, so there's my button. I hover over it, nothing happens. So let's go ahead and add another rule with a hover state. And button hover, I'm going to set the background to dark gray. And then on my active state, I'm going to set my background to red. And nothing happens. Because I believe my background resource is conflicting there. Well, there's a, well, that's not really a bug. CSS would do the same thing, wouldn't it? Let's think. No, it wouldn't. Oh, great. Would it? No. Yeah, let's fix this real fast. Well, no. Well, yes. No? I think so. Quite possibly. Let's write a test for it first. I'm going to jump into my property tests. void background override should set image to null. What do I mean by that? Well, if I parse CGS and I pass in two rules, let's actually do the same rules that we've been using. So I'm going to set button with a background of resource bleh, and then I'm going to do button.hover with the background of dark gray. Then I'm going to create my element, which give me a new element of type button. Oh, come on, stop this. With pseudo classes of hover, style equals sheet build style for element, and style dot get property background property dot image should be null. If this test passes, I'm going to cry. Oh good, it failed. Now where's my test runner? Here you are. Oh, I get an object reference not set to an instance of an object? What? Really? Huh. Oh. Maybe? Yes. Builder. What? No. Oh, stop this. Stop that. Why is builder null? Never set the builder to anything. Oh, right. Okay, well, I don't really care about that. Let's fix the syntax error. There's a syntax error somewhere in this right there. All right, sweet. Okay, so let's fix this. How would I fix this? If I go into my property types, my background property, and we set background. Okay, so if the name equals background, I want to set all of their values to their default colors and set their isSets to true. Do you think background color does not override background image? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that right here what I'm doing is I'm setting the background. When I'm setting this property, it should override everything back to their defaults, even though it's inheriting from a different rule. I could quickly prove that to you guys, just for sake of completeness and not making me look dumb. Blah, 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 blah. Give me a sec. I just need a random place to dump a file. Alright, new folder 4 on my desktop. It's a decent enough place. Example.html. Let's open U up. Let's make sure we grab the right doc type. For some reason, I still have not memorized the HTML5 doc type, which is kind of embarrassing when you consider how small it is. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so if I had a style that had a rule that set the background to a URL of, let's grab the background off of 3D Buzz. Alright, so if I set the background to you, then I said test hover, background is red, and then I created an element with the class of test. It should, see, what? Wait, what? Oh, no, stop that. There we go. See, when I hover over it, it turns red. That's because what's happening is if I go ahead and force the element state to hover, we see that it's overriding the entire background, which is also setting it to setting the image to null. Now, if this rule were changed to be background color is red, then nothing happens. And the reason nothing happens there is because I'm only overriding the background color, not the background URL, and the background image does override the color. So let's go ahead and fix that test real fast. So what I need to do is, if you type in just background equals, then I need to set the color to null and the image to null. Note that I'm using the properties for a reason. I'm using the properties because they'll also set the is image set and the is color set to true. And we get a passing test. And then just make sure we didn't break anything else. All of our tests pass. Okay, so now if I go ahead and build this, jump back into Unity, which Unity flew off some, there it is. We see that our hovering and our activeness does indeed work. Now the cool thing about this, which is another thing that CGS gives you that Unity does not have by default, is, why did I do that? Is just like with CSS, I can go ahead and say, okay, so if you set the background, if you hover over it, I also want to set the border color to black. Border color does not work. Did I never do... Really? Why wouldn't I have done that? Thought I did that. No, I never did. Huh. Alright, let's go ahead and implement border color and border width. No, might as well. Okay, border color and border width. So if name equals border color with an invariant culture ignore case, then we are overriding the color of every one of our borders. So I'm going to say for each border in borders keys, borders keys, that's fine. Borders at direction.color, or borders.direction equals, oh, I do have to do the to list, don't I? So I have it up there. dir.width, no. Borders dir.width color. Get color value. Passing in values, passing in log, is single is true and is required is true, that's good. With color, color. And if it's border width, then we want to get a numeric, or get a number value. Width. Int width. Eh. Oh, great. Stop this. Okay, then there we go. So now I have border color and border width, which will set the border color and border width of all the 4 borders. And it still worked because the requested color value was not found. Yes, it was. What? Border color, get color value of border color, that should work. Oh, derp, I forgot to return. And that's why you should write tests for everything. I'm a hypocrite, aren't I? And it's still failing. Requested value color was not found. Okay, so we are going to write some tests. Tests, property tests. Border color overrides all border colors. Okay, so let's say I have a button with a these guys, and then I have a button hover, and the button hover is going to say border color is black. Then that means that our border property should should match. Whatever. Let's do this imperative style. For each var border in style dot get property border dot color should be new color property or color value, sorry, of colors dot black. And for some reason it works. I hate unit tests that pass that should fail. Oh, maybe I just forgot to recompile. Okay, anyway, like I was trying to say before, one of the really cool things about CGS is that we can override any property on hover or on active. So there you go. That's texture generation and some basic covering action. Like I said, on next week we'll be taking a look at the actual positioning of things, because that's going to be the most complicated aspect of CGS. But at this point, we really have, other than positioning, we have pretty much everything already built, which is nice. Yeah, this is where things get really ugly. But that's alright. I think that pretty much wraps everything up for today, unless anybody has any questions or anything that they want me to go over in particular. Are people still awake? Alright, well, I think that pretty much wraps everything up, so I'll see all you future people next week.